Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rabbi's Daughter podcast. I'm Shira. I'm here, the daughter, and I'm here with my dad, Abba. Hello.
Hello, Shira.
Hello. It's good to be back. We haven't recorded anything for a while because you were away in the army, and that's basically what we're gonna speak about today.
Good topic.
Yeah, very good topic because it will take time to wrap everything up. So I want to start really with the decision. That was probably a while ago. I wasn't even in the loop by then. I don't think I knew. And what really made you do this? What was in your mind when you decided?
Right. So that's a very legitimate question because it's very not obvious for somebody in my position in life to join the IDF. You don't hear about Charedi rabbis entering the army, especially the Shlav Bet program. The one which I did was also a month-long program, which brought us up to basic combat level. This is not something which most people would have expected me to do. The truth is, there were a number of factors that brought me to do this. One of them was the fact that I'd spoken so much about army service for Charedim since Simchat Torah, since October 7th. It's been on my mind. It's been in my drashot, in my teaching. It's been in my writings. Basically, every article that I penned, that I wrote, in whichever forum, focused on the army issue. And at the end of the day, I felt that there's something a little bit, morally weak to be writing about this so much and expecting others to do it, while I myself am not sharing in this burden / privilege. And the more so in the community. In the community, we had a few guys that joined the Shlav Bet programs. Wonderful, young men. I say young, they're younger than me. They're not 18. But they're young men who joined the army through Shlav Bet. And some of them did really meaningful miluim, really meaningful reserve duty. They went in for some 2-week Shlav Bet program. And then one of them, for example, did some training program of how to fix tanks, and ended up working 2 months, on the Gaza border fixing tanks, and his wife is like, what happened? We were just doing this little innocent, innocuous Shlav Bet 2-week program, and all of a sudden my husband's gone and he's busy working with tanks, and even got injured towards the end of his service. So, I felt this kind of moral demand that I should also serve myself, to be kind of na'eh doresh na'eh mekayem, if you know what I mean, that it's but beyond that, I also I wanted to set the example. I wanted to lead not just by words but also by actions. Actions are often louder than words, they're more meaningful. Yeah. And by my going into the IDF, I felt that was a strong message. But beyond that, I guess the third reason, if you want, was I had a certain itch for adventure. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like the Israeli culture that we don't know.
Yeah. I grew up in London, obviously. Then I came here when I was 17, and I went straight into the Charedi space. And I was there for many years, living this Charedi bubble, being alongside the rest of Israel, but not really a part of Israel. And that changed when I went to study at Hebrew University, and when I did my internship at the Supreme Court and so on. And then I became a part of Israel. But to really be a part of Israel, the army... That
was Ben Gurion's message. It's the Kurituch.
It is the melting pot. But, irrespective of what Ben Gurion intended or didn't intend, army is such a basic part of the Israeli culture. Everybody, not everybody, but, a great majority go through the army, certainly men. Yeah. And so there was something in me that really kind of brought me to that place. And by the way, it took a long time for me to actually get into the army. I applied a long time ago. I did my Tzav Rishon, meaning that the original going through these questions that are really targeted at 18-year-olds, and it was very weird to have to answer them. But anyway, going through that process and getting a profile that enables you later on. And for the program that I did, meaning for the for this month-long training, I needed a pretty decent profile. You needed a kind of combat profile. And so it took me time just to get a profile because of army bureaucracy.
Yeah.
But in the end, I made it. And in fact, I applied for the very first training program that was available after I got my profile. Happened to be it was this one, and I'm very grateful for that. But those are kind of the reasons. I'll tell you something else, but very briefly. I know there are other things we want to speak about. But my father lived in Israel as a teenager. He was born in France, but he moved with his parents to Israel, I think when he was, I don't know exactly, 11 maybe, towards the end of elementary school. I don't remember exactly. And then he was Israeli. He had a Taudat Zehut, he was Israeli, and he was supposed to do army service. However, he avoided army service, or his parents on his behalf.
Why? They weren't from.
They were not from, but his parents didn't want him to do army service. They were afraid. And so in order to avoid army service, he went back to France and finished his high school education in France and didn't do the army in Israel. And I didn't know that story so well. I recently revisited it when I was with Saba for a little bit of time. I revisited that story. And for me, this was like a little bit of an opportunity to kind of make amends for that. You know, my father didn't do army service, even though all of his friends did. And don't forget, this is around the time of the Yom Kippur War. You know, these are times when army service was, you know, first of all, it was the obvious thing to do.
It was interesting they didn't want him to do. They both experienced the Holocaust. It's kind of
yeah.
You would think they would want their son to be in the Israeli army.
You know, on the one hand. On the other hand, you know, they went through the Holocaust. They were Zionists. They were strong Zionists. But they were afraid. They didn't. By the way, his sister, Sabine, Aunt Sabine, she volunteered. She did army service as a volunteer. And she did her full 2 years in the army as a volunteer for the army. So she did it. And in fact, she was very, very moved that I was in the army. When she saw pictures of me in the army, she was like, wow, that's unbelievable. She was very moved.
She has although she lives in France for decades.
For a long time.
She has the Israeli sense.
She's very Israeli.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, I was thinking all these years and also after the war started that what you do as a Ba'ezrachut, like as a citizen, civilian, I guess the Israel as a country and the Jewish people, they benefit more from what you do as your work more than what you do in the army, basically. Did it occur to you? Was it like something that was, how do you say, shikul?
Right. Was it a consideration, a factor? That's a good question. And yes, that did go through my mind. That what I'm doing outside of the army is probably more valuable, significant than my value as a soldier. However, I had two very fundamental responses to that thought, even though it did come up. One response was that that's true for thousands of soldiers. Thousands of soldiers, not the 18-year-olds, but I'm talking about the reserves, right? The reserve soldiers who have put in hundreds of days of reserve duty, right, since October 7th and before, but of course, since the war broke out, Simchat Torah, that's been just something which has characterized, right, the population of Israel is reserve duty. These are people that have a lot of very important things to do. And nevertheless, they put them all aside and they went into the army to do their service. And that is what being a soldier is all about. You put everything else aside. And I felt that if everybody else is doing this, then I need to be able to do that also. And not to make those considerations, not to weigh that up. You know, sure, you can say, oh, you know, I'm doing such important things. No, as a soldier, that's what you do. And I felt that that was the right thing for me to do, to lead by example in that sense also. You know, if everybody would say, well, I'm doing such important things, then we wouldn't have certainly not a reserve army and maybe not even a regular army. And therefore, we need to be able to do that. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, you know, for me, like many things, going into the army is like opening a door into a new world. It's into a new universe. The army is like a separate universe, parallel universe. And you open a door into that world and you never know where it will lead. It was the same thing, for example, when I went into Hebrew U and I went to study law, and I didn't really intend on, becoming a lawyer and working as an attorney or something like that. That wasn't the dream that I wanted to realize. But I felt it's the right thing for me to do. It's opening a door into Israel, into Israeli society, into the legal profession on some level. And I didn't know where it would take me, but in the end, it did take me in completely different directions than I would have anticipated and that I could have predicted. And I felt, and I still feel, the same thing is true of the army service. I just finished now, but now I'm there. I'm part of it. I have my personal army number. I'm in the miluim, in the reserve lists, and who knows where it will take me. And perhaps what I'll end up doing as a part of the IDF will be no less significant or maybe even more significant than what I've done hitherto previously. So we'll see. So I think for me, it's a healthy perspective on life generally.
Yeah, I think it's also the way you and mommy, you brought us up really that way, that we do things and we don't really know what's going to come out of them, but we try, and then it's like ping pong balls, and then we'll see what will come back.
You start a process and you don't know where exactly it's going to lead. I actually told this to some of my friends in the platoon of the company that I was serving in. Pluga is kind of it's a company, but ours was a bit smaller than the regular large company, so it was more like a platoon, more like a machlaka. Yeah. In any case, so I told a lot of my friends there who had like very precise plans. They said, we want to finish our service and then we want to do miluim here or there or something else. Tell me, you know what, guys? We're opening a door. Let's see. Perhaps you'll have other options that will actually be, more significant, more meaningful. And if you don't have that breadth of mind, if you don't allow those options to exist at all, then you might miss them. Yeah. So, of course you have a plan, but be open-minded.
I agree with it so much. I remember when I decided what to study, I was having a hard time because I couldn't picture myself in the future. I was like, what am I going to do? I love many different things. And I remember you were telling me that all the time. You just start something and then it will lead you somewhere you don't know where. And it doesn't make such a difference what you choose. You just choose something and
just
try.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
But just, who knows where it will lead. Absolutely.
Yeah, stay open to...
Right.
Oh. Okay, so I want to tell you my experience. When you said you were going to go to the army, I was very thrilled and happy about it. But the one thing that bothered me was thinking about you getting commands from a 20-year-old. It really did. I was saying to myself, I'm not going to go there because it would be too weird for me. Like, you're my father and I respect you. And just seeing you saying Kenam Mefaked to this 20-year-old, that would be weird for me. And how was it for you?
Yeah, so I like that question. Especially for me, that I come from a position of authority, like a community rabbi and a dayan and so on. I'm used to being in a position of authority. And all of a sudden, our squad commanders, mefakdei kita, the squad commanders, like you say, 20-year-old kids, 20-year-old, very young men. They've just finished their squad command courses. And then they're ordering us around. And they didn't have a lot of mercy on us, meaning, whatever we had to do to become soldiers with a full discipline of being a soldier, with a regimen, with a full thing, they did. And it included, all kinds of, cruel and unusual punishments, which is just what you do in the army. Meaning, if you're out of line in your formation, then you'll run around buildings or you'll go down into push-up position and hold it for a few minutes. And we did that stuff. And I did that stuff. And it was, like you say, a little bit weird. I'll tell you, also a few points that I think are relevant for this question. First of all, it was a choice. I chose this. It wasn't placed upon me. I wasn't coerced. I chose this. And choosing it meant that I chose to be a soldier. Being a soldier means taking commands. Being a soldier means being bossed around by your commander, by your officers, whoever it is. And I chose that. And being in a position of having chosen it made it also much easier, made it more palatable, because it's what I chose. I wanted this. Like, I wanted to be a soldier.
Like the full experience of that.
Yes, I wanted to be a soldier and to be in the army the way it is. I didn't want some fake army experience where my commanding officers are being gentle on us because we're these, old dudes and we're not cut out for it. I wanted the real army experience. And I got it. And I felt very privileged to be able to get that real army experience. So even though it's, a little bit strange to have these 20-year-olds, bossing you around, that's the real army experience. That's what I wanted. That's number one. Number two, being in the army in a deep way, and this was my perspective going in, means kind of losing your individualism to this greater body, to this greater, general, Jewish people, army of the Jewish people. In the army, you don't have that individual rank or standing. Everything that you have outside of the army, you lose it when you go in. All of us wear the same uniform. All of us are beholden to the same army hierarchy. It doesn't make a difference. So we came in obviously as privates, and others are higher ranked, but we're all in the same business of being a part of the army of the Jewish people, right? And in that sense, actually being bossed around felt kind of good, meaning I'm here, I'm losing. It's not Rabbi Pfeffer. I even told my friends in the army, here I prefer not to be called Harav, like Harav Pfeffer. Don't call me Rabbi Pfeffer. Just call me Yoshua. I'm an equal among equals. We're in the army. We're all in the same army. I'm an equal among equals. It didn't work because from the beginning I started giving shiurim because I was asked to, and then the officers caught on and they ordered me to give shiurim. And it's
kind of funny to order you to give a shiur.
I know, but everything was under order. You can't do things without an order. You can't just start giving a shiur. So
could you say I don't want to?
No, it's an order. You can't refuse orders. And I was very happy to give shiurim. It was nice, and all my shiurim were very on point also. I always spoke about things that are relevant for the army service. They were inspirational shiurim that I enjoyed, and all the guys there also enjoyed them. And they also started to call me, Harav Yoshua. Even some of the commanding officers, even some of them called me Harav Yoshua. Some of them didn't, because they didn't want to make this kind of awkwardness of, well, he's a rabbi and so on. So there was some, it's a delicate point. But from my perspective, no, I'm not coming in as a rabbi. I'm coming in as a soldier. I'm part of this great edifice of the army of the Jewish people. For me, that was such a big deal. In the Torah, when we find the count of the Jewish people, how are the Jewish people counted? The answer is Kol Yotzei Tzava B'Yisrael, those who go into the army. That's the Jewish people. The Jewish people is counted as a count of those who can fight, those who can be soldiers. And going into that position for me was a tremendous privilege. And I remember myself running around the building in one of the punishments that we got for not doing a proper formation. I remember thinking, literally, I really remember this, looking at my friends all running around the building, huffing and puffing. And I'm thinking, wow, what a privilege. Wow. What an honor it is to be in the Israeli army, in the army of the nation state of the Jewish people. What an amazing merit that our grandparents and great-grandparents could have only dreamed of. To be, some of them had to serve in some army, the German army or the Russian army, who knows which army. And we get to serve in the Jewish army. We get to serve. I was like, wow. What a privilege. And I just remember. You were
running and sweaty.
Yeah, I was running, doing these falling out of line punishments kind of thing, discipline-oriented punishments, and thinking wow, what a blessing that I'm here. Now, I have to be honest and say, in all sincerity, I did it for a month. It wasn't a 3-year track. So it's easier to think about the privilege and to focus on that when you're doing it for a month. It's obviously harder when you're doing it for 3 years. And also I did it at a ripe old age when I was able to reflect on these things. The average 18-year-old just does what he's told because he has to. It's a different kind of place. But for me, it was very, a very special and very meaningful experience. And it made all the being bossed around like, yeah, that's why we're here.
Did everyone though feel that way? Or you had some soldiers that were like doing it because all of them were old and all of them made a decision to come. So was this the spirit of everyone?
I think most people took it well, but not everyone. Some were like, what is this?
Do you have any funny story
of people who, I mean, I don't want to speak about individuals. Who knows who's going to listen to this, view this podcast? But yeah, we did have people who had to be really disciplined, because they expected this to be more like a kind of summer camp, summer camp with friends. We go away. And all of a sudden to be given these, punishments and physically draining punishments was not fun. Now some tried to game the system, okay? Like claim injury or claim weakness and then get special permits not to run and not to do push-ups and who knows what, and you can't do that. But it was, first of all, it was very much the exception to the rule. And second of all, the company generally, didn't take kindly to that. Come on, guys, we're all in this together. We're here to pull our weight. I remember one of the guys literally got up and gave a speech. Everybody needs to, give his maximum, and we're all in this to get the most out of it. And if we don't all pull our weight, so we're all going to suffer from it. I remember this guy gave a speech. All right, I'm not going to do that, but it was a wonderfully mixed group of people.
Was it mostly Charedim? It was all Charedim?
That's a good question. It was formally, it's called a Charedi Tironot, meaning it's Charedi basic training. I would say like a large percentage, maybe 80%, had some Charedi connection, meaning they grew up Charedi, they went to Charedi schools, they went to Charedi yeshivot, whatever it is. But not all of that percentage, not all of that 80%. When you look at them, they don't necessarily look super Charedi. There were a few that were, the real McCoy. They send their kids to Charedi schools and so on. I would say overall it was like a spectrum. You had the kind of real Charedi, quote unquote, mainstream Charedi. Even them, there weren't, these are not Avrechem from Panovich, but yeah, you had the guys that, whose kids are in the yeshivas. And then from there you had a spectrum of levels of belonging to the Charedi world. And you had those who had already kind of made an exit and are sending their kids, let's say, to religious Zionist institutions and so on, but they still have a Charedi background, and therefore they were still part of this cohort. You also had Olim. You also had people who had not necessarily just people who made Aliyah. And
did you have Chilonim though?
No. It was all from. And the guys who made Aliyah were not necessarily Charedi on any level. We also had a few. There was a guy from Haramor, wonderful guy. Well, we became really good friends. There's a guy from the Gush, a Ram, somebody who teaches at the yeshiva, who also became very good friends. I made some really good army friends, so it was really nice. Yeah.
Did you get any bad responses from people when you decided to go? Because we were speaking before, we're not in that kind of system anymore, in a way.
Right. So we do live. I mean, the area where we live, there's plenty of people who I think, would look at me certainly with a frown, and would be unhappy about the very concept. They'd be upset by my setting this example. This is exactly the example that they think should not be set. But this is not the milieu that I hang out with. So I didn't get people who, directly, gave me a call and said how dare you? Nobody did that.
That would probably happen. How many years ago, if you would do that, do you think it would happen? Because things changed in the, I guess, past 2 decades.
Yeah. There's a critical mass of Charedim for whom this is something positive and that this is something good, and those are enough people to be friends. So I'm not looking for necessarily for friends outside of those circles.
Yeah.
At the same time, just before I went in, and this is after I'd already signed up, we had this small demonstration outside our home. You remember that?
It was funny though.
It was funny.
Was like
it was a bunch of kids.
Ridiculous.
And so Mummy thinks it might be connected. I don't think it was connected. I think
we got some nasty phone calls.
And we got some good nasty phone calls, right? Harassment calls. I don't think it was related. Who would know? It was before I went into the army, so who would know about it? But who knows?
Do you care about those kind of things?
No. In fact, they kind of validate what I do. If people are not upset, if no one gets upset about what you do, so I guess you're not doing enough. If no one's upset,
you can't be friends with everyone.
Yeah, well, you have to pay a price.
Yeah.
Well, if you're doing something meaningful, again, in the public sense, by the way, also in the private sense, anything meaningful that we do, we pay a price for. There's some price. You lose some friend here, or you lose some option that you wanted to keep open, but you have to close it, and so on. And also here, if no one's getting upset when you're doing something in the public view, something that's related to public policy, if no one's getting upset, then it's not meaningful.
I remember you gave a lecture that was maybe 3 years ago or something. It was here, like in this room, and you gave this lecture. I was there, and there were many people there, and you spoke about the idea of the costs of a choice,
alternative costs.
Yeah, and that you have to look at the cost, you have to acknowledge it to know that it's there, and that it makes my choice more valuable.
So good.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It was really good.
If you ignore the alternative cost, then your choice becomes devalued, because big deal. But when you appreciate the alternative cost, that's exactly what makes your cost, gives it value.
Yeah, like lately I've been spending time with people who like are in politics in a way, and it always bothers me, and you say the same thing, that people are not ready to give up on some of their not even values, but just on some of the sides. Like they can't stay friends with everyone, and it just doesn't work.
Right.
You see, you can't do that, not for long.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who always want to be okay with everyone. I have to be honest and say, I have a little bit that tendency. It's hard for me to lose friends. It's actually hard for me to not be okay with everyone. Like I have a strong disposition.
Yeah, I think I have that in my genes also.
Right, and I need to work hard to say no. You're not going to be okay with everyone. You have to take a position. You can't just be neutral, because being neutral is not being neutral in the end.
Did you, like in your journey from being really in the hardcore Charedi system to where you are now, which is also kind of Charedi, did you actually lose good friends?
Sure.
Really?
Of course.
At what point?
At several different points. It's a process. It wasn't like some one cut-off mark, but of course, there are people, even where we live in Ramat Aleph, that I used to be really close with, and now, I'm not saying we cross the road when we see each other, but we're not friends anymore, and it's true also for some of the Rabbanim that I used to be close with. Not many, but there are some that I have difficulty with, because they shifted to a more extreme position, and I shifted to a much more integration oriented position, and so on. And there's a tension there, and sure.
Like I don't feel I ever experienced that, because I'm young, and my friends and the people that surround me now, they're open-minded. Like I wouldn't be their friends if they wouldn't be. So right. I haven't had this experience.
Right. Okay. But,
I should find different alternative costs.
Right. Or you should find some good positions to espouse that will help you to lose some friends.
I should get more extreme.
Right.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, what would you do? You're a rabbi, but you also have rabbis. You have people that you listen to. What would you do if they would tell you not to go?
Well, that's a very nice question. I intentionally didn't get into that potential problem. Meaning I went, for example, to, Charedi Rabbi, Rabbi Weiss, who is, absolutely my, inspiration on so many levels, and absolutely Charedi Rabbi. But I didn't, first of all, I didn't want to put him in an uncomfortable position, like asking, should I do this? And number two, it was something that I knew I wanted to do, and that I felt is the right thing to do. So I did go to him before I began. I didn't want him to see some picture of me in uniform and say, like, what happened to Yoshua? Like, how did this happen? So I went to him before I started. I said, Rabbi, I wanted you to know that I've made this decision. I didn't want you to find out by some third party or by seeing some picture. And therefore, I wanted you to know and kind of get a bracha. I didn't remember exactly if I said those words. But he smiled and he said, you're a big boy. You make your decisions. And he gave me a big smile. And that was that. I didn't go to any Rav and ask the question. And you always have to know which questions to ask.
But if you're young, if you're not a rabbi yourself and you're young, let's say 27 or something, and you do have rabbis that you listen to, then what do you think is right to do then? Because it is a tension. Like, you're supposed to listen to your rabbis, although you do pick a rabbi. But
yeah, the answer is you choose a rabbi. Of course, you have to choose a Rav, right? Aseh lecha Rav. Excuse me. It says, Aseh lecha Rav, uknei lecha chaver, right? Aseh lecha Rav is you have to make a Rav for yourself, right? That's the point. It's not about, compliance with some distant rabbinic figure who doesn't know you and doesn't know anything about the circumstances of your life or what motivates you or what you're going through. You need to have a Rav that knows you, that knows what you're going through, and that you identify with in terms of the way he thinks, and it aligns with the way you think. Now, that doesn't mean that you have the answers to all the questions. That's why he's a Rav, and you're not. And even then, not every dilemma needs to be brought to a rabbi. Sometimes you have the answer to the dilemma. In fact, oftentimes you have the answer to the dilemma. Kadosh Baruch Hu gives us the tools with which to face the choices, the dilemmas, the questions that we have in life. Sometimes we want to go to a Rav to sharpen the different sides.
Yeah, that's what I think.
To understand them better. But as a rabbi, I tell my community members, I'm not making the decision for you. I'm going to help you to reach the decision. And that's what I expect, generally speaking, people to do when they go to the Rav. Not that the Rav shouldn't be the one that is, supplanting them, their own discretion. They retain the discretion. And the rabbi helps them to reach the right decision for them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way we're also in the house, really. You try not to make my decisions for me, even though sometimes I try
to avoid it.
Yeah.
We all do.
Yeah, it's it's fun.
It's fun to avoid responsibility, but at the end of the day, you grow up and yeah.
At the end of the day, I want my life to be mine and not
exactly.
Yours. You have your life.
You want to own your decisions. You want to be responsible and accountable. So yeah.
So back to the army experiences. Yes. You were in Pikud Aref.
Yes.
How do you say Pikud Aref in English?
Home front.
Home front.
Home front command.
And what's the? I really don't know. What's the what do they do? Pikud Aref. What's their big thing?
Pikud Aref. So home front in Israel. That does a lot. The whole home front was established kind of after 1990, I think in 1991. This is after the Iraq war, right? When we had missiles fired at us. And who takes responsibility for dealing with a civilian population in times of war? Like, who takes care of that? And that was a big question in the Iraq war. And in 1991, the home front was established for that. For questions, meaning military army-related issues that pertain to the civilian population. So And the home front does a ton of things.
I just know the app. I have the app of Picot d'Orient.
So
it's very useful.
Right. So that app is part of the home front's task of alert, right? Alerting the country to potential attacks, to hazards, to whatever it is. And they did a fantastic job.
Yeah, it was very helpful.
They were amazing in that sense. But of course, it's not just that. The home front also is the one that takes care of, sites where you have a missile that falls, right? Who takes care of those sites? The answer is the home front, right? They'll be on site. They'll take care of the wounded, the injured, the dead. They'll make sure that the site is cordoned off. They'll make sure of the safety of the neighboring buildings and so on. They engage in a lot of search and rescue operations. That's a big part of what they do. They engage in peacetime. So there'll be a lot of the battalions that are doing the arrests and search for ammunition in Yehuda v'Shomron, Judea, Samaria, the home front. Those are fighting battalions of the home front. They have good, fighters. Anything related to chemical warfare, the only people who are qualified to do that in Israel are the home front people.
Wow.
So they have whole, facilities for training for chemical warfare, even though today it's not quite as big an issue as it used to be with Syria and so on, but it's still out there. And many other functions. A lot of their training is related to earthquakes. We haven't had an earthquake in Israel for approximately 100 years. And historically, Israel has a major earthquake every 100 years. So
thanks for telling me that.
Yeah, so we don't
Be
know.
aware.
We don't know when the next one will be, but somebody has to be ready for that. And who is that? The home front. So all of this is done by Picot d'Orient, by the home front, alongside a lot of other stuff. They do a lot.
Wow. And you said, not just you said, I was at your Tekasium.
Yeah.
How do you say that in English?
Yeah, the final ceremony.
Yeah. And it was clear that there were many, many women on the base. They could be actually quite
majority. The senior.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have senior commanders who are female, who are women. And, the majority of soldiers serving in the home front are female soldiers, are women.
Yes, I have two questions about that. First of all is, how was it for you? And second of all is, do you think it's a factor for people who want to go to Shlav Bet? Do you think it should be?
Yeah, so again, Shlav Bet is not done exclusively in the home front. There are other Shlav Bet programs in other areas of the IDF. The home front wanted to do Shlav Bet programs because they need soldiers. They don't have enough manpower. And that's why the Shlav Bet, they specifically asked or specifically initiated these Shlav Bet programs for Charedim because they need more manpower. They need more soldiers in the reserve battalion units. And they wanted the Efes Shalosh. They wanted this higher level of proficiency of fighters because they need fighters. That's literally why they did it. Yeah. But there are other areas. In any case, so home front. So yeah, there's a lot of female soldiers on the base because it was a Charedi program, training program. So we were sheltered. We were cordoned off. We were not allowed to go to the areas where you have the general population of the base. We were only allowed, we had what's called Gimel Gimel, Gvulot Gizra, meaning our, borders where we were allowed to go. And we were not allowed to go outside of those boundaries. Those were our set boundaries, which was a couple of buildings where we had classrooms, where we would study. We had areas where we would do our formations. We had areas where we would do the training. Okay, so when we went to, for example, the shooting ranges, so there was some, interaction, but it was very limited. And don't forget, we're not 18-year-olds. All of us were like older guys. So they told us, the commanders told us at the beginning, listen, for 18-year-olds, they have their special bases. Netzach Yehuda, Chashmonaim, whatever it is. For us, we're on a general base. So we're going to be seeing girls. We're going to be seeing, these young female soldiers, but we're not going to be interacting with them. And we were okay with that. In fact, they even told us at the beginning, because one of the battalion commander of our battalion is a woman. Now, we had no interaction with her because, the highest interactions we had was with a company commander who was a Charedi guy. We didn't get to the battalion commander level, but she did address us. She spoke to us once or maybe even twice.
She spoke at the ceremony.
She spoke at the ceremony.
She seems impressive.
Yeah, impressive woman, strong woman. She was at the base in Zikin when it was attacked on October 7th.
Wow.
So yeah, she fought against the Arab terrorists on October 7th with her soldiers. She led that. So yeah, very, strong and
wow,
an impressive soldier. So she addressed us, and they told us at the beginning, if anybody has a problem with that, so you can leave now. But again, this wasn't a problem for us. This was okay, and we had our areas. Now, in full disclosure, I didn't quite keep to that rule of the gimel, the boundaries that we were allowed to be in. I sometimes broke that rule because I went to the shul. I went to the local shul, which had a decent.
It's very frum of you.
It's very frummy, but it was very helpful for me. I drove in. On days when we came home, I drove in really early because I don't want to be stuck in traffic. So I drove in super early, and the shul was like my quiet space. Before we started, like at 8:30 a.m., I would daven and I would learn with my chavrusa on the phone and so on, and I would do all of that in the shul, even though we were not, strictly speaking, allowed to be there. So I kind of broke that law, but all right, that was my small secret while we were serving. So anyway, so we managed well with that. And Shlav Bet, again, because it's older people, I don't think that's going to be their major issue. It did raise a lot of thoughts in my mind about what do I think about female soldiers.
Like in general?
In general. Because, seeing these women there, these young women, and seeing like how good they were, meaning how proficient they were. I also spoke to guys in these mixed units, and I asked them, like, how do the girls manage? It was very interesting for me. So these are guys who are doing, heavy training to become, let's say Efes Sheva or Efes Sheva, which is
a year of what you do.
Yeah, it's 7-8 months. It's becoming, good level, and we experienced some of what these guys do in their training, in their, let's say, field weeks and so on. It's hard. It's it's a lot of crawling exercises, a lot of battle drills that are really tough. And he said, yeah, the girls have to do the same as us. He said when they're carrying a stretcher, then the guys understand that this is their job to get under the stretcher and to spare the girls that particular part of the drill.
I wouldn't think it's very healthy for a woman to go through a Tionut Efes Sheva, but if she wants to, they're probably good. Like, they're not less good. So
we have experience. We have. I mean, the army has good experience. It turns out that it's not very healthy for women to work in tanks, and have to pick up these heavy, tank missiles. That's bad, and it's 100% more female injuries. Meaning 100% more injuries among female soldiers than male soldiers. But that's in specific divisions. In the regular infantry, so it depends. In the commando forces, you don't have barely any female soldiers. But in regular infantry units, you can have. And it raised a lot of thoughts for me about what do I think about it, about can the army manage without all of these female soldiers?
I don't think they would.
And also about what the entry of Charedim into the army would mean for them, because of course the Charedi entry means that we're going to be seeing much more, male only, if we'll have real entry of Charedim.
But you do have though male only paces in the army.
Oh, listen,
they're just too hard.
But there's a few though. That's for a limited amount of soldiers.
Like, I wouldn't think all the Charedim could go to a place that is necessarily too hard for women to go to.
I'll tell you, the army has had a trend in recent years of integrating female soldiers in as many units as possible, wherever possible. There's been this feminist bent, this feminist direction within the IDF, and it's very explicit. There's the a special advisor for feminist issues, and
really, that's a job?
Yeah, of course it's a job, and she becomes a kind of representative of the civilian feminist organizations, and that's just bad. That's.
I mean, it's just not professional. Like, armies shouldn't be dealing with those issues.
Well, I think that after October 7th, I think there's been this realization we have to go back to focusing exclusively on winning wars, and
I'm not saying women can't help in that.
Issues, right?
They could be great soldiers, but they have to be great. They can't be women.
Also, it shouldn't be an agenda. The army's agenda is not to integrate women into every unit. The army's agenda is to win wars, and having men and women serve together creates a lot of problems, not just from a religious perspective, but also from an army perspective. In fact, one of the army commanders that we spoke to told us that explicitly. One of the senior commanders of the base told us that, of course, having men and women serve together causes a lot of problems. And it's not, as you can imagine. I spoke about this to some soldiers that I met in the shul. We didn't have close interactions with soldiers on the base, but I had some of those in the shul. So I would speak to them, and they would tell me about the challenges that they go through, and it's not simple. And I think that going forwards, it's very interesting to think the army wants to integrate women, sure, but now especially they very much need Charedim, and those two trends, if you want, those two aspirations to integrate women into Charedim, that we're going to have to sort out the tension between those two trends. And that's it. I
mean, nobody thinks, though, that the Charedi units need to have women there.
No, but having more and more Charedim in the IDF will curb, just by dint of the reality, will curb some of that trend of integrating women everywhere. Because we're going to need male, instructors, let's say. Today, almost all the instructors in the army, let's say paramedic instructors, I don't know, whatever it is, are female. And of course, once you have these Charedi battalions or brigades, then we're going to have to reverse that trend on some level. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
I think they should have a Shlafbet for women.
They do. There is a Shlafbet for
women. There is a Shlafbet. But just think about it. They can be very professional at, different areas. Computer science, medicine, anything. Right.
So there is a Shlafbet for women. In fact, I know one of the commanders of I think she's officially a company commander, I think.
What's a company in Hebrew again?
Pluga. She's a Mempei, which is Mefakeret Pluga.
And she's a Charedi woman?
She's not Charedi, she's Datilomi, but there's a lot of Charedi women that serve under her. And this is in Shura, Machane Shura, which is identification and bringing to burial, and
That's
all
rough.
Of that connected to women, to female soldiers. And it's rough, it's tough, but it's also an unbelievable,
it's very important.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable schus, and it's an unbelievable mitzvah to be a part of that. And there are Charedi women who serve in that capacity as a part of the army.
Yeah, like I guess some of them could actually do miluim and something very meaningful. Shura is very meaningful,
sure.
But I was thinking also of like their profession as psychologists, as I don't know, anything.
Yeah, so that's
what do you think? Where do you think to go?
In my miluim?
Yeah.
That's a good question. So I had an interview with the rabbi of Pikud HaOref. Okay? He interviewed all of us. But for everyone, the interview was like, 1 minute. And for me, it was like a quarter of an hour. Because we sat down and we had like a great conversation, kind of rabbi to rabbi conversation. He was telling me about all the different kinds of questions that they have in Pikud HaOref and what they had in the war that just now, transpired, and the kind of dilemmas that they had, which was fascinating to hear. And then he spoke to me about the dilemma of where to put me. It was fascinating. The default is to move from our basic training into the battalions, and these are fighting battalions of the Home Front Command. and you become reserve soldiers in these units. There are like 40 battalions in the Home Front Command. 35 of them are reserves, and 5 of them are regular fighting units. And that's where they need manpower. They need more people. And so that's the default. And for me too, that was the default. But he said, 1 second, once like we have a rabbi who's actually like, posek and renders decisions, maybe I should put you in the halachic division, which is a small division within the Home Front, but you can actually like make use of your, rabbinic knowledge and proficiency in that unit. And you know what I told him? I told him, I don't have a preference. I told him
Does it have to be in Picod Aleph?
So formally, you move on to Picod Aleph. But the truth is that for me, there are probably other options also. Because, for example, the Chashmonaim division, Chashmonaim, which is the Charedi brigade. So I would imagine that I could be like there's a position in the army called the Rav Lochem, meaning a fighting rabbi, a rabbi that takes part. He's also a Lochem, but he's also a rabbi, and he goes in with the units and he gives them the inspiration and the values and so on.
That sounds like good for you.
And I could perhaps do something like that as a part of Chashmonaim. Right now I just finished my basic training, so I'm before those decisions yet.
Do you think that you want to do something that's connected to law?
No. Again, I have that option, meaning there is somebody actually in the community who is a judge on these like army tribunals, and he's a judge and he renders his decisions. Most of them are connected to terrorists and so on, or Arab criminals and so on. So he offered to pull me into that, but I don't think so. I don't find that especially, exciting to be a part of that. It's too civilian-like. If I'm in the army doing my reserve duty, I think prefer to be part of a fighting unit.
And you would do reserve duty even when there is no war, right? Like from now on, every year, you're supposed to go.
So there's a lot of talk right now about how much civilian duty, the reserves, how much reserve duty the reserves are going to be doing. They're changing it to make it something like, 60 days or 70 days.
60 days a year.
It's a lot.
Wow.
Like 10 weeks. And that doesn't include the training time. 60 days of like actual service, and it's probably another couple of weeks just to train. That's a ton of time.
How can that happen though? Like people are not going to be able to manage their businesses like that.
It's wild. I don't know. I mean, it'll be staggered, so I don't know.
I think Charedim need to go to the army.
Do you?
Yeah. Just think about how much time it takes. No, I'm serious. If every soldier is going to have
young Charedim,
60 or 70 days a year.
This is part of the tension. Yeah, part of the tension around the Charedi draft is this, that if we'd have more regular soldiers, that would release, or at the very least, it would lessen the need to have that much reserve duty. And I think that's a deep part of the tension around the Charedi draft. And so if that's what you mean, so I agree. We need a lot more regular soldiers, Charedim and also non-Charedim. There are areas in Israel where you only have 70-80%. Everybody should be pulling their weight in terms of participating.
Yeah. What if I have one day something that I could participate in? Maybe I'd also do that. We'll see.
In the IDF?
Yeah.
So it's not simple. Let me just put that on the table. For girls to serve in the IDF, it's not simple.
What if you're 35 though?
Well, you're not 35.
I said one day.
One day. Okay, one day.
Why do you think it's not simple? Because it
doesn't because of boys. Yeah, because of boys. And once you're in the army, you have to. There has to be a trust. Now, in the Charedi units, so there's good supervision of the Charedi units. But if you're in the big army, just alone in the big army, you need a strong sense of trust that the army is gonna respect, let's say, your religious sensitivities. And I'm not sure whether
it's not just the trust. You need to be able to live with the fact that they're not always going to respect that.
Which is and that's why religious girls have this ability to receive an automatic exemption, or to do Shirut Leumi instead, which can be very meaningful.
Yeah.
You know, you can do Shirut Leumi, which is super meaningful, like Abigail is doing now. And frankly, I think that's a good option right now for the religious, for the young religious woman.
Yeah, that's true. I have a last question for you.
Okay.
Like this month was kind of crazy. Speaking about how do you say shigra?
Routine.
Like your routine was pretty crazy. Do you think you're gonna take anything from that to your life? Or anything else that you learned in the army, like something else that's gonna apply to your life now?
You know, there's a few things. And I've given this a little bit of thought. So one of the things is the idea of time. In the army, everything is time.
Yeah.
You know, the amount of times in a day that you hear the word sha'anim, like take out your watches, set your timers, you know, your stopwatch for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 8 minutes. And you have to fulfill, you have to make sure that the mission is accomplished in that time. And the time is sometimes more important than the task. Meaning, make sure you respect the times. And for me, that's a big lesson. And I'm taking that to my civilian life. You know, time. Respect the time. Give yourself times. You have to be finished the mission by this time. And you know what? If you don't, so ask for an extension. And okay, another 10 minutes. But that's it. You know, respect the time. Make sure you divide up your day into units of time and respect them. That's a big deal. It's a big lesson.
It's true. There's so much we can do on a day. You can't even realize that.
It's amazing. And the army has that big time. Another thing that I had in the army is this idea of, you know, I call it, you know, like bitul, like I mentioned before, this nullification before this larger enterprise, and taking that into life too.
How?
Because even here, we're soldiers. You know, we're soldiers. You know, again, it's not quite being in the army.
Let's say we're part of a bigger story.
But yeah, we're part of, you know, the Jewish people. We're part of this historical progression and on many levels, you know, of course, we retain more of a sense of self than you do in the army, but there are times and places and opportunities where you do need to be able to nullify that sense of self before this greater mission.
I think also it's something that's supposed to be in our heads all the time, that we're part of something big. And when we make a decision, so yeah, like I ask myself, what does Hashem want me to do?
What does Hashem want me to do as a part of the Jewish people, as a part of this greater calling? And there's something outside of the army of being a soldier too. You know, you're a soldier of the Jewish people, even if you're not in the army. And that idea is something that I've taken with me, that I think about. There's another point, which is not becoming addicted to the comforts of life. In the army,
it's very addictive.
In the army, you have to like leave all those aside. You can't just, I'm just taking a coffee. There's no coffee. There's no comforts. You know, you're allowed to eat in the times that are given to you, but that's it. You can't say, I'm just going to have a snack. There's no snacks, you know?
Why do you think it's important though? Like,
because if you become addicted to these comforts, then they occupy too much of your attention, too much of your time, you know? You're thinking, you know, when am I my next cappuccino? No, you just don't be addicted. I'm not saying you're allowed to drink cappuccinos. I'm not against it, but don't become too caught up with them, you know. And that's something I think, you know, that I also need to take from the army experience.
Yeah,
you know, to be less, you know, engaged.
It's also knowing that you can live without it. It's not something you can't live without.
Yeah, and you know, you sometimes when I catch myself thinking, I don't want to eat like lunch. I don't want to eat my fleishik lunch because it's meaty and I'm going to give up my coffee later on. Stop making all these ridiculous, you know, accountings. You know, this is your food now. Just eat it and move on. You know, and you're going to be meaty for a while. So what? You know, like in the army, that's what you do. You know, you get food, you just eat it. There's nothing else to eat. So that's good. It's a good mindset.
Yeah.
You know, to not be
I think
too
people should have this
full-time.
experience, like in general, of like a time that they're like outside of
detached from their comforts.
Yeah.
You know, I slept on the floor, like a few nights. We slept on the
It's
floor.
rough.
Yeah, but you can do it. You know, so I'm not saying every day you need to sleep on the floor. You know, but you know you can do it. You can become more detached from your, you know.
I think it's also realizing the sense of how comfortable our life is. There's also that. It's like, yeah, I get to sleep in a bed. That's pretty cool.
Right, to be grateful for the small things.
Yeah.
I like that.
Okay. Well, thank you. That was fun.
Thank you, Shira. Yeah, I agree. It was nice to speak about the experience and nice to have good questions. So
Yeah.
thank you for this.
Like there are many things I didn't know. So it was cool. So thank you. And thank you everyone for watching and listening. And see you the next time.